previous article, Media Framing of Movement Protest, the Case of American Indian Protest. And what the author did here is got together with another professor and did content analysis of the news media coverage of the American Indian movement between 1967 and 1974, so which is 76, I think, about the peak of American Indian movement protest. And you know, you have in there, of course, the Wounded Knee in '73, right, where American Indian movement took over the town of Wounded Knee for a year and a half, and before that, of course, we have the takeover of Alcatraz, right, Alcatraz Island. They were there for almost 2 full years, and were working to create a new society, right. They were really anarchist, right, and to tie it in with, you know, our other presenters, really wanted to overthrow the existing power structures, create maybe not exactly the same goals of the anarchists, but certainly a radical approach to overthrowing power structures. And they wanted to create a new society that emphasized their own rights and their own powers and their own culture, right? And this was about bringing back their culture. And much of what happened was that there was a huge resurgence in American Indian culture. If you read Joan Nagel's book, right, she talks about that. And so anyway, I wrote a book and got really interested on the memory of and how the American Indian movement tries to rewrite memory. And I published that a few years ago, and have been working on other American Indian movement stuff. And I found this article, and I thought, well, this is really interesting. But I didn't think it was done very well. And so I was using it in my classes, and I found myself critiquing the author, telling my students, like, this could be done better, this could be done better, this could be done better. And then somebody said, well, why don't you do it then? Right? And I said, oh, all right, I will, right? And you're going to help me, right? We're going to do it together. And that's exactly what I've done. And that was about 5 or 6 years ago. And so what I've done every semester is I get students in not all of my classes, because some of the classes just don't fit, right? But the classes I teach on inequality, on race, even sometimes on gender, but not so much, and of course on social movements and social change, right? All those courses I can use this replication study, and what we do is we actually we do much of the same thing that the author did, but we do it in a better way. And so the author basically did a sample of the American Indian movement coverage, and that was one thing that I didn't like, right? They sampled it. Why do we sample? There's only 250 stories. Why should we sample 50 of them? Right? Get all 250, right? Do a full population instead of a sample. And so I got on the Vanderbilt Television News Archive. If you guys aren't familiar, it's a wonderful resource for getting access to television news, and it's all the way back to '67, I think, up to the present, and it has ABC, CBS, NBC, and then starting in the late '80s, I think, CNN is also there. And so you can get on the website for Vanderbilt TV News Archive and order these stories. And so I ordered all of them. I got all 280 or whatever it was of those stories. And then what I did is I created a survey, and oh, that's not working. Okay. So I created a survey. I'll try to connect here. No, not working. All right. So I created a survey that had basically had a video of the news story, and then underneath it said, "Tell me what the main themes are in this news story." And this, of course, followed what was done in this article. And what the author found was that there was the militant theme, the stereotype theme, factionalism, civil rights, and treaty rights. You can call them frames or themes, whatever you like. You can see here the authors only did 52 articles, or 52 news stories, and like I said, I did about 5 times as many. And so I really just wanted to ask students to code the articles, or code the news story. Watch the news story, tell me which frame you see in the news story. A very simple, participatory type of project. And I wanted to see if things changed, right? But actually what I found, what was a lot more interesting, really wasn't about the frames, right? And the frames are interesting, but what was really a lot more interesting was the methodological aspect of this. And that was not only, you know, doing 250 stories instead of 50, but doing 200 different coders instead of just 2, right? So what happens, right? In this particular article, there were 2 coders, and their intercoder reliability was like 98.9% or something, right? They agreed on everything. And, you know, and I wonder, right, of the accuracy of such things and whether or not those are good measurements. And I started to ask myself, what would happen if we did 200 coders instead of 2? And so I created a more robust survey that had not only the video and what theme is this, but the standard demographics, race, class, gender, education, your income, your parents' income, as well as questions about race, such as do you support assimilation, right? Not exactly in those words, but a simpler, do you think that ethnic groups should have to give up their culture, you know, to fit into society, or do you support pluralism? Again, not with that exact term, because I didn't know if students really understood it. So do you think that ethnic groups should be able to keep their ethnic culture, right? And so we asked different questions like that.
Coders.
Yes, to the coders, right? Yes, exactly. The coders were asked that question, right, before they started doing the coding. And they were also, of course, asked their education, their race, and they were asked a couple of other questions about ranking, right? And so I asked them to rank the warmness. If you're familiar with the GSS, there's questions in the general social survey about warmness towards different ethnic groups. So how warm do you feel towards Hispanics? How warm do you feel towards Native Americans? How warm do you feel towards white? So I just took those questions and added them right into the survey as well. And you know, if our author is right here, and our old traditional images of, you know, doing coding and content analysis is correct, none of these factors really should make a difference, right? Race shouldn't matter, gender, social class, attitudes about assimilation, right? They should all pretty much just wash out, right? None of that happened. None of it. Every single one of these factors, every single one, I ran chi-squared analysis, and every single one was statistically significant. So race shaped whether or not they chose that frame. Gender shaped whether or not they chose that frame. Education shaped whether or not they chose a particular frame. And you go through all of every single question was statistically significant. So I'm, you know, wondering, like, our methodology and the way that we do coding, and, you know, how we assume that we can just have 2 coders and they just agree, and that all of our background information doesn't matter. Who we are, I mean, I shouldn't call it background, all of our personal, you know, information doesn't matter. Who we are, our identities don't make any difference in how we interpret things. I find that, with my data, I find that to be problematic. I'm able to show that it clearly does, that your race, your class, your gender, your education, your view towards assimilation, your view towards the warmness of American Indians, all of that shapes whether or not you see a militant frame in that exact story, right? I mean, they're looking at the same video, right? But somebody who identifies as, you know, as more wealthy looks at it different, will not see the militant frame, whereas somebody who's, you know, poorer will. And same thing with gender, right? Males tend to see that militant frame and women don't. And we see all of these patterns happening with every single frame, not just with the militant frame, with all of the frames. So race, class, gender, education, all of our attitudes about race and assimilation, all of those things shape whether or not you are identifying a particular frame within the same story, right? You're watching the same video. Statistically significant differences, exactly, right? And so they're all chi-squared. I didn't run any regressions or anything like that, but they're all chi-squared, and they were all 0.000, right? I mean, this was, you know, very high statistical significance. And so that's basically what's going on here, is that this has turned much more into a methodological piece about, you know, the critique of how we do content analysis, and, you know, the fact that we might assume that, you know, your identity doesn't shape how you interpret the same image is a little silly. And it reminds me of a study that was done a long time ago, and they actually showed American Indians, cowboys, and Indian movies. And they asked them, what do you think about this cowboy and Indian movie? Who do you identify with? And the Indians, they identified with the cowboys. Right? They didn't identify with the Indians, they identified with the cowboys. And, you know, this, of course, not really methodologically quite the same, but it reminds me that, you know, your personal identity, isn't always going to shape exactly what you see, in the sense, or at least that's what they were arguing, in the sense that you want to identify with the hero, right? As the American Indians said that they identified with the cowboy because the cowboy was the hero, right? They didn't want to identify with the person who was getting killed, right? They want to identify with the heroes, and so this has perpetuated this image, that how you interpret a particular image, right, or a particular video or something like that, is shaped by your race or your ethnicity, and the research is starting to question that, right, including my article, and I think that what I'm starting to see is how we interpret things can be very different, and doing that content analysis, I think, suggests that we need to pay attention to those things, not just assume that race, class, gender, education doesn't matter. If you're doing a content, even with an N of 2, if you had 2 coders, you still need to pay attention to those issues of race, class, gender, education, right? Who are the people coding, right? Don't those things matter, right? It's not just how you interpret the frame, but who you are might shape how you interpret those things. So that's it.